before we get started, I've gotta come clean. I know I said the next title that I'd talk about wouldn't be a shonen, but actually what I meant to say is that it's not a battle shonen. That said, if you enjoy Bleach for the quality and complexity of its narrative, I can all but guarantee you that the Apothecary Diaries is exactly the kind of story you're looking for. That is, of course, if you haven't discovered it for yourself yet. As far as main characters go, Maomao is easily one of the best I've seen in a very long time. And the fact that both she and Frieren exist in similar GOAT discussions speaks volumes alone. But setting comparisons aside, there's a lot that this show brings to the table in its own rights that speak for themselves. Despite debuting alongside Frieren back in the fall of 23, it wasn't swallowed up in the shadow of its popularity, rather it stood out strongly as a giant in its own rights, and for a number of reasons, not the least of which being its wide-ranging mass appeal across virtually all demographics. Just from the top of my head, we've got mystery, comedy, slice of life, drama, politics, horror. There are a lot of different ingredients in the mix here that would otherwise be overwhelming in nearly any other show. But in this one, they all revolve around one ingredient in particular that helps to bring all these different flavors together. Man, I'm hungry. On its face, the show's premise seems pretty simple and straightforward. It follows the daily life and times of our aforementioned Maomao, and if that sounds mundane, that, my dear fellow weeb, is a smokescreen, because I can completely assure you that it is anything but. Spoilers ahead. As soon as we dive into episode 1, we meet her and learn that she's a 17-year-old apothecary, that's basically just the old pharmacist for those who don't know, and we also learn that she works at the most prominent establishment of a Chinese pleasure district located not too far away from the Imperial Palace. One day, while gathering some medicinal herbs to bring home to her father and mentor, she's kidnapped and sold as an indentured servant to work within a section of the Imperial Palace known as the Inner Court or the Rear Palace. And that's all in the first 5 minutes. The Rear Palace was a special area dedicated specifically to housing the Emperor's family, including his many wives and concubines, and it was actually a real thing in Chinese imperial history. From what I understand of my very brief research on the topic, the rules governing the area were slightly different from emperor to emperor, but its function was more or less the same. It acted as a living area for his family, from which his future heirs would be chosen according to the rank and status of their mothers. There were also very strict rules in place preventing just anyone from entering and leaving on a whim. For example, the only people allowed within the Rear Palace besides the concubines themselves are eunuchs, and if you don't know what those are, think Varys from Game of Thrones, as well as female servants, both of whom are responsible for keeping the inner palace itself running behind the scenes, as well as just generally serving and tending to the needs of the consorts living there. Re-enter Maomao, whom we find, queen that she is, doing her absolute best to do the bare minimum that's required of her while being as unnoticeable and unremarkable as possible until she reaches the end of her term and can finally return home. What an icon. She could easily lean in and leverage her numerous skills and vast knowledge to try and secure better conditions for herself, but any increase in pay she'd earn would go straight to her kidnappers, and so spite must therefore win the day. Not to mention, in a time period where scuffing someone's kicks could earn you the French haircut, being just another faceless servant girl nobody seems to remember comes with a unique kind of safety. That said, being an apothecary and a natural problem solver at heart, she can't help but intervene once she deduces that the cause of the curse that's been killing all of the Emperor's children lately is actually due to heavy metal poisoning from makeup powder found and used all throughout the Rear Palace. In sharing this knowledge, Maomao ends up saving the princess, but blows her cover clean into the stratosphere, exposing her as an extremely intelligent and diversely talented individual, which not only earns her the special attention of the Rear Palace's manager and resident pretty boy, more on him later, but also earns her a big fat promotion to being the direct servant to the princess's mother. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not mention who the princess's mother is? My apologies, where are my manners? Ladies and gentlemen, meet Lady Gyokyo, the most favored of the 4 highest-ranking consorts to the Emperor. So much for keeping out the eyes of the lords and ladies. This is where the show truly begins, as now Lady Gyokyo and Jinshi, the Rear Palace's manager I mentioned earlier, start leaning on her to help them navigate the chaos that is daily life within the Rear Palace. Maomao's insight, observational skills, and general intelligence make her perfect for solving all manner of problems and mysteries that pop up on a regular basis around here, while her medical knowledge and Dr. Frankenstein alter ego make her uncomfortably ideal for the position of food tester for Lady Gokyo. As Maomao puts it, the rich and famous in her world are constantly surrounded by all manner of plots and schemes for the power or favor they hold, giving some context to her whole humble servant shtick. The best way to avoid getting caught up in the game per se is to stay off the board entirely. And although having that awareness couldn't prevent her from getting caught up within their crossfire, it more than makes up for it by giving her the skills necessary for navigating this new minefield she somehow stumbled her way into. And naturally, those that recognize this also recognize just how valuable it is to have someone with said skills in their inner circle, even if she's excruciatingly oblivious about it herself. And this, my dear weebs, is where we finally bring the microscope onto our favorite little drug dealer. Because although on the surface it looks like Maomao's several steps ahead of everyone and has few areas for growth or improvement, she's far from being just some Mary Sue. Despite her honestly unicorn-like qualities, it's that exact knowledge and awareness that habitually holds her back the most as a person, and maintains the walls that keep nearly everyone she knows firmly at arm's length. Her ironically rigid mindset does help to keep her safe, but it's often at the cost of reducing others, and even herself at times, to their status, and she doesn't really expect much from people beyond what their title or position would dictate for them. And it's really interesting to see just how this both helps and hinders her throughout the series. There is no better example of this than her relationship with head pretty boy in chief himself. Jinshi is the perfect representation of a rich, powerful, noble type using any and everything at his disposal to advance his own goals, and Maomao is originally just one of his many pawns with which to do so. That said, I wouldn't quite call him the heartless rich boy just yet. If you've paid attention to any of the promo art for this series, it won't surprise you at all to know that bro gets lost in the sauce like immediately and starts working to try and catch a peek behind the walls that she's got put up so tight. He ends up getting a lot more than he bargained for, as what little bits of info he does learn about her quickly causes him to confront that opportunistic mentality of his. After seeing firsthand how that entitled attitude casually decimates the lives of those too powerless to do anything about it, it's not long before he loses the ability to see Maomao as just a tool altogether. Unsurprisingly, this is also when he starts hearing the usher music in the background and switches from asking, "How can she be useful to me?" to asking the question men have pondered since the dawn of time itself. How do I get this girl to like me? And to that sentiment, ladies and gentlemen, we grant a moment of silence, because despite how down bad our boy is, Maomao wouldn't be able to see it with neon lights. It's played up for laughs and is genuinely hilarious, but this obliviousness gives her a bad habit for rubbing people the wrong way. She's got a tendency to emphasize class differences between herself and those around her, which not only keeps everyone pushed out, but also blinds her to her own unique charms and good qualities as well. And that's not in reference to just Loverboy either. Even when you take away the fact that she saved her daughter, Lady Gokyo just really likes Maomao. She seems to be in awe of her intellect despite being rather shrewd herself, and really just seems to enjoy herself more whenever Maomao's in the room, and will routinely go out of her way to take or create opportunities to bring her around some more. It doesn't take her long to find herself within the good graces of the other three top-ranking consorts either. Too bad she's too busy in the kitchen to pay much attention. Then again, to be fair, she does deserve some degree of slack for her cluelessness when you take into consideration the life experiences that brought her here. The same skills that help her survive and earn her respect with the Pinky Up crowd would lose that very respect instantly if they knew that she learned them while growing up around the red light district, where being able to stay ahead of the social curve, so to speak, could be the difference between life, death, or much worse. In that sense, you can kind of consider Maomao's talents to be just as indicative of how much effort she's had to put towards her own survival, as well as her overall competency. Sidebar, as you can probably tell from the subject matter by now, this show does a really good job at tackling some pretty heavy and complex topics while weaving them seamlessly into the story. It's also got a lot of equally heavy things to say about said topics, but not once have I ever felt preached to while watching. Instead, it leans on the strength of its narrative to help get its points across. One of the ways that it does this that stuck out to me in particular is how, out of seemingly nowhere, you can just suddenly be faced with some horrifying or deeply disturbing fact of life that the characters are faced with, and then those same characters will just kind of shrug things off and move on in a way that can feel almost unnatural. It really helps to hammer home how normalized a lot of things are in this world and precisely what that means for the people living in it. Maomao herself even mentions that despite all the gold and fancy jewelry, there really isn't much separating the rear palace from the average brothel out in the city. And she'd know, considering that this is the only world she's ever really known up until now, making it not at all surprising to learn that she's never developed any real understanding or connection to the ideas of love or romance. In her words, she left all that back in the womb, making it clear that she feels no need for it, and then further implies that the vulnerability it brings is a liability she wants no part of. Even when she does things like acknowledging Jinshi's attractiveness, for example, it's often in relation to how much conflict she thinks a person that attractive could potentially cause, as opposed to how she personally feels about it herself. She's got this general distance from the entire realm of romance that you can almost physically feel whenever she talks about it, even if only to herself. At times, she can speak so matter-of-factly that it often crosses the line into irreverence, which tends to leave those she's talking to at a loss. I know that there's a lot of heated discussion around the relationship between Maomao and Jinshi and whether or not she even likes the guy, but this has much less to do with how she views others and much more to do with the way that she views herself. When you listen to how she describes herself, especially in relation to others, you get the distinct impression that she's fully disqualified herself outright from the dating pool, writing herself off as not being the kind of woman anyone would normally be interested in. I mean, she's out here using herself as her own guinea pig. That should tell you everything you need to know about her sense of self-worth and image. Having been surrounded by some of the entire nation's most beautiful and sought-after women from birth, it starts to make sense why she'd have an obliviousness towards the opposite sex rivaling Zoro's navigational skills. And I'm only like halfway exaggerating about that. It's crazy to see this mini Chinese Sherlock Holmes solving murders from the tiniest of obscure details one minute, and then being completely blind to the cute boy staring at her from across the room every day. As I've mentioned a few times now though, it's not just her physical features that she disqualifies herself for. She's also got a strong fixation on status as well. On the one hand, this is a big part of how easily she seems to be able to handle virtually any personality she happens to come across. She's always remarking on the lowliness of her birth and how unlikely it is for someone like her to be in some of the rooms she's in, so even when she has to assert or defend herself, she's rarely ever doing so by looking down on people, and is always paying attention to the human reasons behind everyone's actions. Even that, however, is nothing when compared to what is possibly her most powerful special ability. The power of minding her damn business.
None of my business is none of my business.
See, despite being basically Jinshi's informant, she's very cagey and selective on what info she gives up to him, often making him do all the work of putting the puzzle pieces together on his own. Sometimes she'll even just straight up help people to get away with whatever shady shenanigans they've been engaged in. Again, icon.
None of my business is none of my business.
On the other hand, however, this open-mindedness and grace she shows for her fellow servant class citizens all but disappears when dealing with those of especially high status. She's constantly mindful of the fact that her remaining alive hinges on how much the shot callers around her can tolerate her, so that always plays a significant factor in how she interacts with those far above her. She is so committed to staying out of their business that she's actively stopped herself just short of solving some of the story's biggest mysteries, simply because knowing too much would be a great way to end up on a t-shirt. This is yet another thing that inadvertently rubs others around her the wrong way though. In her attempt to maintain her humility, she can sometimes just straight up insult people to their faces without even trying or being aware of it. It's so bad that she's had to be pulled to the side and told explicitly that her habit of discounting and belittling herself will close doors that people around her are trying to open for her. Actually, it's that exact attitude that leads to Jinshi dismissing her from service after that matter with Feng Ming wraps up. When a connection is found between her and Feng Ming's family, Jinshi is initially torn between letting her go and making an exception for her so that she can stay. In an effort to respect her agency on the matter, he asks her directly what she would like to do. And honestly, this should be an easy no-brainer. She's more than settled into her new position at this point and even has access to all the medicinal ingredients and facilities she'd ever need. Not to mention, she's also got the only job in the world that actually requires her to literally feed her appetite for poison. However, for fear of overstepping her status by what she perceives to be begging, she beats around the bush instead by saying that she'll do whatever is asked of her, which is all Jinshi needs to hear in order to send her back home in a misguided effort to restore her freedom, even though that's actually the worst thing for her right now. The contrast between Maomao being extremely street smart and her general indifference towards herself ends up adding a morbidly fun and almost playful tension to the show that thankfully doesn't allow for it to stray too far into melodrama territory. As knowledgeable as Maomao is, you really get the impression that she's just kind of stumbling her way through life. It's just that her extreme competence and sharp wit keep her on her toes well enough to handle whatever curveball her chaotic life seems to throw at her. And although she may not admit it, she kinda thrives in it. And as much as she tries to downplay and limit it, she's got an insatiable curiosity, and all these mini adventures that constantly pop up in her everyday life help to give her an outlet for that seemingly tireless brain of hers. Yeah, she's for sure not beating the ADHD allegations. At its core, everything and everyone in the Apothecary Diaries revolves around Maomao in one way or another, whether they're aware of it or not. And part of what makes it such an engaging watch is in seeing just how she manages to navigate it all while still being unapologetically herself despite. The show isn't just smart, it's smart about how it captures and portrays smartness itself, balancing Maomao's sharpness with her cluelessness in a way that makes watching feel like a breath of fresh air. I can really only think of maybe one other show in recent years to bring similar vibes to the table, but I'm saving that for another video. Hopefully. I'm really looking forward to where this series is going to take us next, and I'm already dreading the end of the season that's quickly creeping up on us. It might even be time to dive into the light novels, depending on how long we'll have to wait for another season. For now though, that's it for me this time around. Hope you enjoyed watching. And if you haven't yet, I really hope I've convinced you to give the Apothecary Diaries a chance, but if this doesn't have enough fight scenes for your fancy, then no worries. I got something for you. See you next time. Peace.